I don't feel like I deserve any airtime. I would like to give all the airtime to you. To me, you're like a George Orwell that I know you share the same school with. You're like Christopher Hitchens. And Hillel Neuer, when I prepared this, he called you a modern-day prophet. Maybe if the Bible was being written today, like King Cyrus, you'd actually been written into the Bible. So,
That's, by the way, that's far too kind, but I should also point out that George Orwell got shot in the throat.
Well, so. That's the last thing we'd wish for you, that's for sure. But you're a prophet because you see things that others don't see, and you've been writing about this for a while now, and people are only just waking up to it now. But so many people don't seem to wake up to it. And we have contemporaries. I was 10 years before you at the same university. The people who are saying the things, demonstrating on college campuses. My son was at Eton and Hussam Zomlot was invited. We tried to get Hillel Neuer invited. We couldn't get Hillel Neuer invited at all, only on account of him speaking about the Holocaust, speaking about dead Jews, not talking about what's going on today. But these people are your friends. These people are people that you studied with. How do you talk to them?
Well, I'm not sure because they don't talk to me. But no, that's not true. There are a lot of people who are very troubled and misinformed. And my expectation is that the era we're in remains an era in which a lot of people are trying to push away truths that are in front of them. You gave the example of Hillel at Eton, but let me give you an example of another Hillel I know, a friend called Hillel Fuld, who is an Israeli. Some of you will know him, yes.
We all know Hillel Fuld.
You know him. Hillel lost his brother in a terrorist attack a few years ago in Israel, in which his brother was extraordinarily heroic in his final moments and saved many lives. Hillel was meant to be going and speaking in Australia in the coming days for two Jewish organizations, and the government of Australia said that he could not enter the country because of the possibility that his comments might stir up dissent and discontent within Australia. And one of the things that he was told was that the Australian government and authorities were worried that he might tell the story of his brother's murder by terrorists. Now, here's a thought for the Australian authorities, if anyone knows them. How about, instead of stopping the Jew from coming in and telling people about the barbaric murder of his brother, how about you worry about the possibility that you have a country in which somebody talking about a murdered Jew will cause dissent and possible unrest in the country? Maybe, in other words, the problem is Australia's in that scenario, much more than it's Israel's or the Jewish people's. This is something which people are so blind to. It's almost like watching people in total denial of something who push off reality as long as they can. But, as Herb Stein's law goes in economics, things that cannot go on won't. And if you keep encouraging the celebration of terror, the veneration of death cults over democracy, what do you think will happen someday?
Now, this has happened to me, and I'm not a public voice like you. A good friend of yours, somebody that you studied with, went to bars with, hang out in dorm rooms, and they say, Douglas, yes, I agree with you, but you're going too far. Sort of like, and it's not polite, and you won't get that column in the Times or the FT, and could you just tone it down a little bit?
I haven't been told that for many years. I suppose there are some people who think like that, but here's the thing, and for the younger people present, perhaps it's a useful piece of life advice, is that my observation is that if you say something that's true, that you see in front of you, you say it's true, it's rather like the Hans Christian Andersen tale. If you say something that's true, you could face ridicule. You could face people you cared about starting to not care for you. But there are several possibilities then. One is, what, do you want to lie? You want to spend your life lying? You think you're going to have a good life if you do that?
Actually, most people do that.
I disagree. I think they have wretched lives. Absolutely wretched lives, because to know deep in yourself that what you're doing is dishonest and untrue cannot lead to a good life. And the other thing I'd say to that is a very important thing as well, if I may, for the younger people present in particular, which is this. It is true that if you, in my own experience, if you stand up for the truth, whether it's popular or unpopular, there are consequences. But the two clearest consequences are these. One is you will make tremendous enemies, which I've spent much of my life doing. But the flip side of that is you will also make the best of friends. You do not want to be surrounded by people in your life who engage in lies. Much better to orient yourself towards what is true, be unashamed, unabashed, and you will find that you collect other people like that around you.
Douglas, you clearly didn't work in finance, because the vast majority, you paid to lie, basically. That's the vast majority of finance, I believe. So, and I think that...
The finance people in the room can pick that up with you after.
Well, I'm one of them, but I think that something that I see here, I don't know if you'll agree, that in a way, Douglas himself doesn't realize his own courage. I don't think that you realize how much it takes to tell the truth and not care about the consequences. And I have had some contact with British journalists, and privately they will agree with me.
Oh, yeah, that's one of the best ones. There was one, some years ago, there was a debate I was on, slightly unrelated to this, but it's slightly related. The French government in the 2000s had said that they would ban the burqa in public places. In Britain, this was a huge point of discussion. And I was on a radio show on the BBC with two people. One was a Labour MP who was a friend. And the other was a friend of mine who's an Iranian-born journalist who's lived in exile since 1979. And we were having the debate on air. I made my points clear, which was the French government can do what they want. And my Labour friend said that my Muslim Iranian friend and I were being Islamophobic. And many funny things happened on air. But the funniest thing that happened was that we came off air, and my Labour friend slapped me on the back and said, "Douglas, don't forget, we're all with you." And I said to him, "But wouldn't the moment to have said that have been when the microphones were on?" And he said something very interesting. He said, "Well, you've got to understand, I've got a very large Muslim constituency." Now, but here's the kicker. My Persian friend then stepped forward and in the most beautiful, courteous way imaginable said to the Labour MP, "Ah, I see, you are a coward."
I need to make sure I don't go off script here, but I know that you know what a hitch slap is.
Yes.
So, I don't know, we need a Douglas slap or something like that, because are you aware before you do it, when you come out, I mean, there was a couple of videos here, where you just wipe the floor with these people. And you know, people like my wife and I are watching on YouTube, and we watch those videos over and over again, because you do it so well.
I can never bear seeing myself on screen, so I don't watch it. No, what happens is that you know, and everyone here who's done media knows this, that you go in assuming the worst, and then you're surprised still. And
how bad can it get?
And normally what happens is you think, oh, blah, blah, blah. And that one from South Africa was a very funny one, actually, because I was in South Africa to, among other things, speak and to find out what the ANC corrupt government was doing with the Iranian government to defame Israel. As you'll remember, it's when the ANC decided to spend down the legacy of apartheid by accusing Israel of apartheid. And I had a very interesting set of meetings with media and politicians and others. And then one of the media bosses said, by the way, we have an interview, I'd like to interview you. And I walked into it perfectly amicably and happy and thought, oh, nice looking lady, and And then you sit down and then the cameras start rolling and you realize that she wants to kill you. And
but subtly,
absolutely kill you. And then what happens is I just sort of go, it's that. And then you go into a different gear. Yes.
And I'm sorry, Hillel, but I have to say it because you retain your calm and coolness, and it's sort of like your words go in with a knife, you know?
Well, yeah, you can learn that.
We all want to learn that.
Well, it's not difficult. You have to keep your cool, because if you don't keep your cool, you lose. I mean, I learned how to. There was the Cenk Uygur, the beauty that you just saw there. I knew immediately that the most important thing, apart from to show he was a liar, was to get him to fulminate and explode like a volcano and then just scream. Because one of the things that doesn't work well on camera is screaming. You could say it just gives off the wrong impression about a guy. And I knew how to do it. And it's you try to do it in a way that makes them realize just afterwards that you've done them in, you know. But it's quite easy, particularly with men, by the way, particularly very, very pompous men on the other side. You just have to describe them as a funny little man or something, and they absolutely just can't bear it. Yeah.
Well, keep going. I need to get back on script here before we run out of time, so I need to ask you about anti-Semitism. And we're all very concerned, and you see it from a different angle. First of all, where is this going to end? Nobody thought after October 7th that we would see the things that we saw, how quickly the world turned against the Jews. Are you concerned?
Yeah, deeply concerned. This book starts with a number of points, but one of them is, yes, the morning after the 7th, I was in New York. I went down to Times Square because there was an anti-Israel protest already, and there were people justifying the attacks that were still going on, and that's when I thought, we're going to come in for it now. The whole world is going to see something insane. In London, the first protests in support of the attack were on the evening of October the 7th. So, yes, I knew that was coming. I would go back to that point that Israel has lots of challenges, a huge number of challenges, security challenges, internal challenges, and so on. But all of us in the rest of the West have our own challenges as well, and that's exemplified by the fact that, what do we think is going to happen if you allow people to encourage murder on your streets every Saturday? What do we think is going to happen? I mean, it's, as I say, again, it's a sort of form of denial. Everybody here knows that anti-Semitism is many, many things. One is that it's a shapeshifter, of course. It can come from any direction. But another is that it's just the obvious, everybody knows this from history, if they know any history, is that it is the once a society indulges in it, it demonstrates the ill health of the society. It shows that the whole society is going wrong. You start to get into conspiracy theories. You start to get into counterfacts, to non-facts being elevated into facts. And this is just something which I think everybody can battle and push back against. And even when the odds seem rather low that you're going to succeed, you have to keep going. And specifically on the case of anti-Semitism, there is something I write about in this book, and sorry if anyone's heard me say this before, but it's something which I'm passionate about reiterating whenever I can, which is that for me, there's this rule that I learned from Vasily Grossman about anti-Semitism, that it tells you nothing about the Jewish people, but it tells you everything about the person who suffers from it. The person who suffers from anti-Semitism, when they talk about the Jews, just tells you about themselves. Grossman gives the obvious example, obvious at the time, that the Nazis accused the Jewish people of being racists who wanted to take over the world. It's almost like a form of projection, you could say, isn't it? But in our own era, this same thing is the case. We have the Iranian revolutionary government that says that Israel, the Jewish state, is a colonialist state. Yet the government of Iran, since 1979, has been colonizing the entire Middle East, from Tehran to Beirut, to Yemen. So when they tell us this, they just tell us about themselves. When the President Erdogan in Turkey describes the Jewish state as being an occupying power, what does he tell us? He tells us about himself. President Erdogan, unfortunately for him, is the occupier of the northern half of Cyprus, which is an EU member state. Does 1 year to the next, do our streets get filled up with rage-filled individuals screaming for the liberation of northern Cyprus? No. But Erdogan has told us about himself. But here's the one that I've most passionate that people sort of realize, is that when you see the critics outside of the Middle East who get off on this anti-Israelism, always they tell us about themselves. Look at the accusations, for instance, that they lob against the IDF. We heard again the other month the claim that IDF soldiers rush into Gaza and immediately rape women. I will not go into the number of ways in which this is preposterous, but this allegation is made by people who believe that women who were raped on October the 7th deserved it because they were Jews, or deserved it because they were Jews and it didn't happen, or something else. They say that the Israelis are baby killers, yet they will come out on the streets of their cities to support the killing of Jewish babies. They only ever tell us about themselves. So I wish people exercise this more often.
What should people in this room be doing? And I have to add in there that it was from a video, a clip of you on YouTube, where you said to the interviewer, when they make these baseless accusations, they're not saying it because they believe it's true. They're saying it because they want to hurt you.
Oh yeah, that's definitely the case. I mean, why are the routine smears against Israel, for instance, that it is setting up concentration camps, that it is setting up the Warsaw Ghetto, that it is creating a genocide or a Holocaust? These are all simply constructed as ways to wound Jews and friends of Jews as much as possible. That's all. It's a low, ugly tactic, but that's all there is. There is a lot that people in this room can do. A huge amount. First of all, of course, by supporting the work of our excellent organization, UN Watch. But secondly, by doing everything you can in your lives to push back against it and to make sure that your children and your friends are resilient in the face of this madness. You know, there's a poem by W.H. Auden I'm very fond of, September the 1st, 1939, where the poet writes, "All I have is a voice to undo the folded lie." But a voice is not nothing. And if you use yours in the time you have well, you could undo an awful lot of folded lies. And I think we can do so together.
All these all these international bodies institutionalized anti-Semitism that UN Watch tries to fight against. But I walked up to somebody in the street in Zurich, where I live, who was taking hands out for Amnesty International. And I tried to tell the volunteer that She works for a compromised organization. Most of our friends believe that they're not compromised. Hillel Neuer has to go to the Dutch parliament trying to convince parliamentarians. What is the future of the UN system?
Well, I mean, it's never been good, has it? We'll see. I mean, there are lots of positive things that could be done. Maybe they'll come from Washington, maybe they'll come from elsewhere, but UN Watch and others have demonstrated for years the way in which this system is corrupt. And we all know that, of course, but as you say, the problem is a lot of people we know will still say, you know, oh, but the Red Cross said X, or, you know, the Amnesty said Y. I suppose really the most valuable tool is one of the tools that UN Watch wields, which is the tool of revealing the actual truth. And I go back to that thing about them being what they say you are. Consider the number of people who now, online and off, talk about, for instance, Jewish money and Jewish influence in, for instance, American politics. If you look at all of the funding that has ever been used for lobbying by, I don't know, AIPAC or anyone else, it's a fraction of what the Qataris spend in an average month.
Yeah.
So they say things like, we do not want foreign involvement in our politics. And you go, interesting. How are you getting on with the Qataris? We will not tolerate... they do. They just have an obsession with Jews and Israel. But the way to reveal that is just to keep on revealing it. I mean, it's not like this isn't a target-rich environment to expose hypocrisy and human stupidity.
I've spent far too much time on Twitter, and it used to wound me a lot more. It's not easy to do. It's almost like you need training for it. But I need to move on because our time is coming to a close. I enjoy the acerbic sort of quiet wit that happens, but underneath it, I think that anybody who cares about the West must be in pain to see so many of our countries and institutions being torn down. And this guy, Os Guinness, I discovered him recently, he spoke at something called ARC in London. He says that we're at a civilizational turning point. But you always come out optimistic. When I listen
not
to those,
always. Yeah. Often.
Where goes Western civilization from here? Just my prophet.
The one thing I do know is that you always have a set of choices in front of you, and the hour is never as late as some people will argue that it is. I finished this book on a very positive note, actually, as anyone who's read it will know. Some years ago, when I wrote my book, The Strange Death of Europe, I discovered that one of the most common reader responses was people said, that was an extremely depressing book to read. And I would generally say, well, you should have tried writing it. But actually, I say at the end of this book something which I just would love to share with you, which is that one of the things that disturbed me most in the aftermath of the 7th was the sheer lack of human empathy for what the people of Israel went through that day. About 6 months after the 7th, there were two young people who were survivors of the Nova Party. And they landed in England, in Manchester, at the airport. And they were there to raise funds and awareness for post-traumatic stress disorder in the survivors of terrorist attacks. And they were detained at Manchester Airport by British guards who said, among other things, we need to make sure you're not going to try to do here what you're doing in Gaza. And I was just so horrified again and again like that. In New York, the Nova exhibition, the memorial exhibition, opened in New York, and there was a man who lost his daughters at the Nova Party, who had to walk through a crowd on the New York streets chanting for Intifada and praising Hamas. Now this, to be somebody who goes through that and to keep yourself together, that's real courage, that's real heroism. But I've tried the counterfactual a lot of times. Imagine if a survivor of the Bataclan massacre or the Manchester Arena suicide bombing went abroad. Everywhere they'd be greeted only with sympathy, only with understanding and love and care. Yet something has happened that means that the people of Israel are deemed by a large number of people as being uniquely undeserving of these things. Well, as I say in the book, there is a challenge which the people who attacked Paris, who have attacked London, who've attacked multiple European cities, who attacked New York, and who attacked Israel always say. They always have some variant of this line: we love death more than you love life. Hassan Nasrallah famously said repeatedly, the problem with the Jews is that they love life, and this is their weakness. And the jihadists always say this about the West as a whole. They say that we're just people who love life. And I spent years thinking, what do you do in the face of hate like that? What do you do in the face of something so evil? And I realized that, and I said at the end of this book, there is an answer. And in my observation, the people of Israel have provided the answer. Firstly, of course, you make sure that if people like Hassan Nasrallah love death so much, they get it. But the second thing is perhaps much more important, which is simply to turn around to the death cults, to the people who support the groups like Hamas and so on, and you say, you know what? Fine. We do love life. And it's not our weakness. It is our greatest strength and has been for thousands of years and will be for thousands of years more to come. And that when the people like Hamas and Hezbollah and Islamic Jihad have gone the same way as Pharaoh, the Jewish people will still be there to say, I shall not die, but I shall live.
You know, I could keep you here all night, but I think that's a wonderful note to end on. We're so grateful that you're here. We're so grateful that God made you the way he made you. And I think we should all give Hillel Noy, sorry. Douglas Murray, you're the same people.
Thank you. It's a great pleasure. Thank you.